Hey everyone, Coach Lori here with another episode of Conversations with Courageous Cancer Warrior. Today we're deviating a little bit from our standard conversation because we have an amazing guest that I could not say no to. I'd like to introduce Yamilca Rodriguez, who is a creative brand strategist and a personality archetype specialist, and we're going to get into that. Yamilca, thank you so much for being here. I am so excited for this conversation.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited too.
So talk to us a little bit about, so part of why I guess for the listeners, why I was really excited about this is because one of the struggles that we have when we're dealing with a life condition, a chronic illness or, any really a chronic illness that leads to personal relationship problems, family problems. I mean, you name it, under times of stress, we really have a difficult time getting along. So what you have discovered is like archetypes and who you attract. And I would love to talk about what that means. Can you give us an overview of what that is?
Yeah. So basically, we work with the Yang archetypes.
Okay.
And there are 12 archetypes that we really focus on. And what we're doing different than a lot of other people is basically archetypes have opposites. And it's natural, or it's just because of we're humans and we are psychologically, it's a pattern that happens in life. And we are attracted to the opposite. And a lot of people see that, in relationships, whether it's in friendships, and you see that you attract a lot your opposite. You also attract somebody that's similar to you, but the way that we've defined it is that your super fans, like the people who completely love you and will follow you and will do anything for you, is your opposite of your archetype.
Okay. And so that's interesting because a lot of times, especially when it comes to relationships, we're always like, oh, they're just too different from me. Oh, we don't get along because we see things differently. But this is a twist on that, right? Like it could actually be to your benefit.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times when that happens, it's mostly because they're in shadow. And what I mean by that is personalities or people, like we said, we're really trying to get out of that shadow and out of that, whether you call it negativity or that piece that keeps you down. And you really want to kind of bring out that amazing part of you. And a lot of times it happens either when we're not fully invested in that personality, and we want to shift it for some reason or another, or we're just not comfortable showing who we really are, or we just don't have that capacity to understand that, if we just are ourselves, people will love us just the way that we are. And so I think a lot of times when you feel that tension between relationships or friendships of like, well, they're completely the opposite, it's because either they haven't seen it from a true positive and they haven't shown themselves to be who they really are, or it could be like that friendship or that friend or that relationship, that other person may also not feel safe to show who they really are, or just don't really know how to.
That's really interesting. And especially with, people going through treatments and all that, it's really hard sometimes to share your true feelings with people. And whether it's because you're trying to be strong for them, you feel that they can't handle it, or sometimes it's a little bit of like, you feel that other people might be like, okay, enough already. You should be over this by now. So it's really interesting to think about, and most of this is done subconsciously, right? You may not even realize that you're doing this.
Right.
So is there an exercise that people can do for themselves to kind of pull that forward?
Yeah, there sure is. So basically sometimes we have to exercise our empathy.
Mm.
And there's studies that have shown that not everybody is born with empathy, and that some of us are just more empathetic than others. But we all have the capacity to show empathy. And so basically, the way that this works is that what happens is that a lot of times we're like, well, this is how I think, so everybody thinks like me. Well, that's not really reality. So if you feel like somebody is going to get hurt by that, it's maybe because you'll get hurt by that. Or if you feel like you're not willing to tell them things that may hurt them, it's because you're not willing to get hurt. So a lot of times we don't realize that we're actually just seeing it through our own eyes.
Mm.
And so what we need to do is build that empathy piece and put ourselves in their shoes without any subjectivity, you know? And so does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I
And
didn't
so
mean to cut you off. Sorry.
oh, yeah. and so basically what that means is if you can put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and the way that I've really done the archetypes, obviously there's one that you are more geared towards, but a lot of you have two, one primary, one secondary. And obviously as you get more advanced, there's a lot of, little complicated little things that we talk about eventually as you get more familiar with yours. And then we talk about your opposite. And basically what we should all be doing is really understanding all 12 of these personalities, because it gives us an insight on their needs and also an insight on how they want to be treated, that it's not necessarily how we want to be treated. So if we look at the universal look at this, we cut them into 4 different quadrants. You have the people who love to connect, those people that just need that day-to-day interaction with people. And then you have the people who are more independent. That's their opposite. They're more independent. They like to be on their own. They need their alone time, right? And so that may confuse people, because you're like, I need my alone time, so they must need that alone time. And maybe they're the people who need people, right? So there's something that miscommunication or not being completely open. You may not understand that. And that's why we never should see everything from only our perspective. We need to open up and see what others also need and feel. And then the other 2 axes are the people who are more like need the control and the stability. And then there's people who are more adaptable and love change and love transforming. And you can see that kind of like tension there between the 2 of those. So those, if you look at all 4 of those are the universal kind of things that happen just because we're humans.
Yeah, no. And I'm sitting here thinking that this would be very important on how patients deal with their providers, right? Because it's kind of like that whole thing of, oh, I just wasn't feeling him. I didn't like his bedside manner, or, so from a business point of view, like this is also crucial, whether it's with your, trying to get care of your family members, or also if you're in a business and you own your own business, like this is really crucial to understand who your customers are and how they want to be related with. So you have experience with that as well, correct?
Yeah. So we've turned these archetypes that were based on psychology into branding archetypes. So you know how to brand yourself through the archetype, because the essential thing in branding, and I don't think people realize this. I mean, I worked in branding for a long time for one of the biggest companies in this world. So I know branding. And what people miss about branding is that relationship piece. Like they forget that the brand, whether it's a personality, whether it's a product, it doesn't matter. They need to relate to people. There's some sort of thing that's give and take there. And they forget about that. They forget about showing who they are and their vulnerabilities. They forget to show how to connect. And that's why, I mean, I don't know if you've seen this so much nowadays that we're on social media. Video is so incredibly important because you get to know people through just a video.
Right.
And they're saying nowadays that if you're not on video, people are going to have a hard time connecting with you.
Yeah. And it makes sense because, you know, business is very similar to everyday life, right? And we forget sometimes, especially when we're caught up in the moment of healing ourselves, right? The big thing with healing ourselves is like, I don't want to hear it from you. Like, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. Because you're not, the people are kind of not making you feel understood. And the same is true in business. Like, if you're not connecting with people or coming across to what their need is, then there's no way that they're going to connect with you. It's very, very true. It's fascinating for me. So the other thing too, as far as what you talk about too, are the super fans. So is there something with them that, like, if I know that I love people who are energetic like me. I love people, you know, I am definitely attracted to certain people. So on the other side, is there something specific for us to look at for ourselves as being like fans of other people?
Yeah, so that's a really, really, really good question. So I'm going to explain to you the way that I talk about the Ascension Matter. Now, the Ascension Matter is actually 1.0. As we get to 2.0, we look at it as more circular in the dynamic of, you know, life and things like that. But the 1.0, we look at it as a hierarchy of needs, right? We're just surviving here.
Yeah.
And so at the base of the pyramid, you have your primary brand archetype. That's who you just are born with. This is the way you connect to yourself. On the next level, you have your secondary archetype. So your secondary archetype is not your opposite. It's either one of the two axes on either side, whether you're going clockwise or counterclockwise. Okay, so that's your secondary archetype. You define that. And so now that you have your foundation and your secondary, then you go to the opposite. So, and understand that. And then the secondary has an opposite, and that's the very top of the pyramid. So what you're doing is you're ascending. And, you know, in the hierarchy of needs, you ascend to purpose. But all of us have different things. So each axis has a piece. So for example, the independent axis is all about pursuit. The stable axis is all about mission. The connection axis is all about compassion. And then the dynamic axis is all about purpose. So so you don't necessarily have to go to purpose. It depends on where you are. So you might have purpose as a base offering, and maybe you need to get to pursuit, which is what it's really the contrast, the contrary of your nature, right? And the way to really ascend, as we call it, is to get there, is to be able to truly and master and understand your opposite.
Yeah.
And so that's where you don't feel comfortable. You're kind of fighting sometimes against that yourself without knowing it. But there's something there that attracts you to those people who aren't necessarily you, right? So if you're an energetic person, you might sometimes be attracted to people who are a little bit more in control and find kind of the peace inside. For some reason, you're kind of attracted to that. Same with people that all they love is to be with people. They might feel attracted to people who are more independent. Like, how do you do that? Like, how do you become more independent, right? And so that's really what happens. And at the end of the day, as you grow, you need to ascend. And what that means is you need to feel a little bit more comfortable in your own skin with your opposite. And that really, all it does is really show you opens you up to other possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it fascinating because I think up until this point, like you said, our society has been like, this is how you are and you can't change it. And you get along with whoever you get along with. I mean, wars have been started over lesser things, right? So I think it's really amazing. Now you are up to some pretty big things, right? So you're a speaker, you're a consultant, you're a mentor for people. Are you also an author?
Yeah, well, I'm getting close.
Yeah.
So that's how we got connected.
Yep.
So Women Us Up, we're getting ready to launch that book, a collaborative book with, 14 other women. That's super exciting. And you know what? I have 2 collaborative books this year.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
it's so amazing because I've been wanting to write my own book on this particular topic. And I don't know if you've ever tried to write a book, but it's really, really
Yes.
time consuming and hard. And
Yes.
so this year wasn't really my year to kind of focus the time on that, but I will eventually.
Yep.
So I thought, why not, become an author with a chapter in a book?
Absolutely.
Versus having a whole book on your own. And it's great because I got to meet you and you get to meet all these other people. So yes, I have a lot of things coming in the next few months.
I love it. I love it. And as somebody who has a book halfway written already, I completely understand. It's impossible to sit there and either find the time or even just that conversation in your head of like, is this even meaningful? Is this going to matter to anybody? Like, what am I doing? So I am very excited for you about this adventure that you're on. And we're really looking forward to the release of this book. I believe it's August, correct?
Yes, August 14th.
Yeah.
No, but let me tell you a little bit about what you just said, because I've heard this not just once, but like 10 times. And people feel like their story is just not enough.
Yeah.
And I will say people want to know your story. They're really, they're really fascinated by other women who are doing amazing things and doing good things for the world. So yes, your story is important.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And what's really ironic is I started this podcast so other people would have an avenue to share their story. And honestly, I am such a withhold. I don't even, unless people ask me, I really don't talk about myself. So it goes along with what we were talking about, opposites, right? You look for others to kind of do what you sometimes aren't willing to do. So now, how can people find you?
Yeah, so a few things. They can go to my quiz. It's a free quiz. I love getting people on there. I made it as simple as possible. It'll take you less than 5 minutes. There's only 2 questions. And it's at brandarchetype.co. So it's www.brandarchetype.co. And then I also have an Instagram. I really do most of my work on there. And you can find me on Miss Yamilca. Obviously, it's a little different, but Miss Yamilca. And then on Facebook, you can also find me on Archetype Method, because that's the method that we're developing. So those are the 3 ways that you can connect with me.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time today. This was so informative. I'm so excited to take the quiz. I planned on doing that before we got on the phone and then I ran out of time. But I just wish you all the best. And we would love to have you back on as you develop your own brand, I guess you could say, right? With your book and now being an author. And yeah, we really enjoyed this. And thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you. And I'm really excited. And I'll definitely call back when the book is out, and the second book too.
I can't wait.
I'm really excited about that because it's the DNA of the feminine leader. And so I'm really excited about what that entails. So more to come. And thank you. I really appreciate. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. It's our pleasure.